So good morning, or whenever you might be watching this at a later time, and welcome to our Grief During the Holidays workshop. We're going to be spending the next 3 hours together, and we're going to be sharing ideas and practices and invite you to reflect and consider on what we're sharing as to what might feel right for you this holiday season and beyond, in fact, because most of the things, although we're talking about the Christmas season here, most of these things are applicable at many times during the year, during death anniversaries or birthdays or other family gatherings, as much as it is about the holiday season. But obviously it is that time of year. And so we wanted to provide everyone with an opportunity to really reflect and perhaps have some permission, if you will, to take care of themselves this holiday season. So if you haven't already, gather your most comfortable items, your water or tea. I just grabbed in fresh coffee. You pen and a journal or something to write on, or write, paper. And we're going to get started. So my name is Glenda Miles. I'm the managing director of Mindful Healing Space. By day, I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, as well as working at a community organization here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm also a death doula, grief counselor, and yoga and meditation teacher. And I started to study death and dying after the death of both of my parents. They died about 8 months apart from each other, and losing both of my parents in such a short period of time was both challenging and very untethering. And yet this experience also brought me to the work that would definitely expand both my mind and my heart. For the several years, almost 6 years living in Toronto, I ran a collective of death doulas, and we supported people who were dying and their families, helping them navigate death, dying, and the grief afterwards. I work as a grief counselor and therapist, supporting people on their grief journeys. And what I have learned over the many years of doing this is that each person's journey is as unique to them as anything else in this life. And although it may be one of the most challenging journeys that we walk through in life, it is also one wrapped in love, because it is because of love that we grieve. Now I'm going to let Chantal, my colleague Chantal, introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chantal. I am a death doula as well, like Glenda is, and I'm the community engagement manager with Mindful Healing Space. My journey into this realm, if you will, started a few years ago. My father passed away in hospice after his battle with cancer, and then a short 9 months later, I unexpectedly lost my brother. He spent 3 weeks in ICU, and we had to take him off life support. So it's those two events in my life, so close together a few years ago, caused me to reevaluate my life. I quit my corporate finance job and took some time. I've been taking time over the last couple of years just to figure out more about who I am and what I want to do with my life. And I've realized everybody will die at some point. And so there's a huge population of people that need support during this time. And so that's why I am passionate about doing what I do, talking about grief, talking about death and dying, and just trying to make it a normal part of our everyday life, because it's just a fact. We all need to find a way to deal with it in a way that works for us. So I volunteer with the Alberta Hospice and Palliative Care Association as a grief companion. I also volunteer here locally in Edmonton with the Pilgrims Hospice Society and their No One Dies Alone program. In my spare time, I kind of play around with all things woohoo. I like crystals and tarot cards and all that kind of fun stuff, moon ceremonies, and hanging out with my puppy Kai. So
I was going to say, and the cute puppy.
Yes, I've got my door closed, so there will be no surprise puppy cameos today, hopefully. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You can see many parallels in our conversation or in our stories. Obviously, maybe at different times, but certainly parallels. And I think It is not as unique as our individual stories are. The stories that we share are so similar in so many ways, which is why I think it's important to have these conversations, because we normalize the conversation about grief and what it feels like, because often we feel like no one could feel this, right? Like nobody else can have this experience. And then when we start to talk to people, we go, oh, okay, like you get it, right? Because it's such a unique feeling. So we both will be guiding you through presentation. So having some obviously information shared with you, as well as throughout, we're going to ask you some maybe questions to reflect upon. And in which case we invite you to take your pen to paper and journal. Even if you're not really a journaling person, I really encourage you to take this time and practice it. It's really interesting what sometimes comes out when we put pen to paper. Things that we wouldn't necessarily think about actually starts to come out. I had a teacher that would talk about the hand being connected to the heart. And so sometimes when we write, it's more coming from our heart than our head. And sometimes that's important because we spend a lot of time in our head, with the thinking. We'll also be doing some meditation and some exercises, I'll call them practices, that you might then be able to take during this time, this period of time, or any other time in your life, that can help you deal with the emotional overwhelm that can be felt during this time or during our grieving process. So let's begin. I just want you to, so I'm going to grab my books here because I need them and I had them on the other side. I'm going to be sharing lots of resources as well, and it will all be in the document that is shared with you afterwards, including the list of books that I kind of reference and some of the other things. So I invite you now to just settle in and relax with me as I guide you into a moment of relaxation, as I will throughout our time together. Okay, so take a comfortable seat, whatever that looks like for you today. Strong back and a soft front. I want you to begin by looking up to the ceiling. And then as you bring your head down, take an inhale and close your eyes. As you exhale through your nose, allow your body to just feel like you're floating. Imagine yourself floating. With your arms rested against your body, or maybe on the arm of your chair, just allow your hand to start to float up. You may have to give it a kickstart, but then just feel like it's floating like a balloon, your hand coming up, floating up, floating up, while your arm rests against your body. Allowing it to rest back down. Take a few moments to connect to your inner world. Start by noticing your ears. First your left one, then your right one. Your lips, your chest, your belly. Noticing without judgment or need to change. Your left foot, your right foot. Back to your chest. And just notice the rise and fall of your chest with each breath. Be here for a moment. Do you feel any discomfort? Can you be with it? Breathe through it. Allow yourself to sit with the awareness of your breath as I read you a story. This story is called Tear Soup. It's a story by Pact and Chuck Decland. Tear Soup. There once was an old and somewhat wise woman whom everyone called Grandy. She just suffered a big loss in her life. Pops, her husband, suffered the same loss, but in his own way. This is the story of how Grandy faced her loss by setting out to make tear soup. For many years, the custom of making tear soup had been forgotten. As people's lives became more rushed, they found it much easier to pull soup in a can from the shelf and heat it on the stove. But several years ago, Grandy got a taste of a well-seasoned tear soup. One of her friends made it from scratch after her child died. As soon as Grandy tasted the rich flavor of that carefully made soup, she promised herself never again to assume that quicker was better. Because of her great loss, Grandy knew this time her recipe for tear soup would call for a very big pot. With a big pot, she would have plenty of room for all the memories, all the misgivings, all the feelings, and all the tears she needed to stew in the pot over time. She put on her apron because she knew it would get messy. It seemed that grief is never clean. People feel misunderstood. Feelings get hurt and wrong assumptions are made all over the place. To make matters worse, grief always takes longer to cook than anybody wants it to. And then Grandy started crying. At first she sobbed. Sometimes she wept quietly. And sometimes when she was in a safe place where no one could hear her, she even wailed. Grandy knew she had to make much of this part of the soup alone. She learned from past experiences that most people don't like being around tears. Her friends would worry if they knew just how many tears Grandy's recipe called for this time. So the old and somewhat wise woman reflected on her own special recipe as she looked down into the large overflowing pot of memories. It was a task she would repeat many times during the next few months. Grandy winced when she took a sip of the broth. All she could taste was salt from her teardrops. It tasted bitter, but she knew this was where she had to begin. And for now, it was the only thing on her menu. There were things that Grandy never wanted to forget. These included the good times and the bad times, the silly times, the sad times. With her arms full of memories, Grandy made many trips to the kitchen. One at a time, she slowly stirred all her precious and not so precious memories into the pot. But eventually she ran out of things to add. Grandy's arms ached and she felt stone cold and empty. There were no words that could describe the pain she was feeling. What's more, when she looked out the window, it surprised her to see the rest of the world was going on as usual while her world had stopped. Her grandson Chester, who just wanted his Grandy to be happy again, hoped his chocolate drops would make her feel better. The neighbors, all brave yet fearful, dropped by to see how Grandy was doing. They filled the air with words, but none of their words took the smell of tear soup away. Grandy was gracious because she knew how helpless her friends felt. They wanted to fix her, but they couldn't. All Grandy really needed from them at that moment was a knowing look and a warm hug. There were also days where Grandy hungered for a thoughtful ear. Sometimes she would ask total strangers, "Care to join me in a bowl of tear soup?" "No, thanks," most would reply. "I don't have time for tear soup today." Even some of Grandy's friends hurried past her house and pretended not to notice the aroma of tear soup coming through her open door. Grandy found that most people can tolerate only a cup of someone else's tear soup. The giant bowl where Grandy could repeatedly share her sadness in great detail was left for a few willing friends. I'm here, Midge cried. I got here as fast as I could, and I'll be here whenever you need me. What a tragedy. I'm so sorry you're having to make a big pot of soup. Oh, what a relief. Grandy knew she didn't have to be careful what she said around Midge. Midge wouldn't try to talk her out of anything she was feeling, and Grandy could even laugh and not worry that Midge would assume Grandy was over her grief. Sorry I couldn't get here sooner, said Midge. No problem, replied Grandy. I've had plenty of help, but most of these friends will be history pretty soon. They'll be over my tragedy long before I am, but I know you'll still be around. I don't know what to say, but I'll be glad to listen, Midge said tenderly. Come on, tell me all about it while we make some bread to go along with your soup. These two friends who had shared 1,000 laughs and just as many tears pounded at the bread dough together. I feel like I'm unraveling, Grandy cried. I'm mad. I'm confused. I can't make any decisions. Nobody can make me feel good. I'm a mess. I just didn't realize it would be this hard. Why don't we go for a walk while we wait for the bread to rise, Midge suggested. I know exercise is supposed to help me, but I feel like I have concrete blocks strapped to my legs. We better not go too far or you'll have to carry me home, moaned Grandy. Mrs. Chrysalot called and reminded Grandy that she has been making tear soup for years and would be more than glad to come over and show her how to do it the right way. Thanks, but no, this pot has my name on it. Grandy knows better than to let Mrs. Chrysalot or anyone else tell her what she should do to get through this terrible loss. Next, her recipe called for some comfort food. For Grandy, this meant mashed potatoes or ice cream. Comfort food always makes you feel better, at least for a little while. It gets past that big lump in your throat when other foods can't. I think it needs some chocolate too. After all, it was her soup. Grandy kept attending worship, even though she was mad at God. Sometimes she yelled at God and asked why this happened, and sometimes she demanded to know where God was when she was feeling so alone. Still, Grandy trusted God, but didn't understand. She sensed that people believed that if she really had faith, she would be spared deep sorrow, anger, and loneliness. Grandy kept reminding herself to be grateful for all the emotions that God had given her. On some afternoons, people would ask questions like, is it soup yet? Or how long is it going to take? You've been at this for over a month now. It's time to get out of the kitchen. Grandy fumed at the caller's advice. Grandy looked forward to getting the mail each day. She dreaded the day when no more sympathy cards could come. When she was alone and needed to think, she found it helpful to keep notes on her soup making. Thank goodness Grandy and Pops had been married a long time. They already knew each other's tear soup would be different. Secretly, Grandy wished Pops would put more flavoring in his soup, but he doesn't want to, and he's perfectly content to dine alone and sip on his own soup. Making tear soup is hard work. Sometimes it was all she could think about. Even the things that Grandy used to love, she didn't have the energy for, nor did she care about anymore. Some of Grandy's friends over the years had not tended to their tear soup. Their soup boiled over and the pot scorched. What a mess. It took them a long time to clean up their pots and to start over. The smell of burnt soup still lingers in some of their homes. Grandy knew that there were times that she needed to take a break from her soup making, even though it was hard to do. She forced herself to get away. Grandy heard that a neighbor was having to take her turn in the kitchen, so people thought that the neighbor was eating too much tear soup. So Grandy, being an old and somewhat wise woman, called and invited her to a special soup gathering where it's not bad manners to cry in your soup or have second helpings. Soon the thoughtful cook sat at Grandy's table and discussed the process of making tear soup. There were some parts that require help from friends and some parts that you just have to do alone. They shared stories about soup making. They didn't dare tell anyone for fear of being judged as a bad cook. They all laughed, knowing when Grandy remarked how on days when she was daydreaming while driving, she was glad that the car seemed to know where she wanted to go. These people had become Grandy's new best friends. One day, as Grandy and Chester were going for a drive, Chester said, Mom says you've been making tear soup. What does that mean? Well, tear soup is a way for you to sort through all the different types of feelings and memories you have when you lose someone or something special. Remember when your baby brother died right before he was born and your mom sat for days holding his blanket and weeping? She was making tear soup. You made your own tear soup by acting out on your own disappointment when you shouted at Jason, wishing your brother would die too. Remember when Billy's dog died and he didn't want to play with you? Not feeling like having fun is one of the ingredients of tear soup. I remember when Aunt Meg got divorced and they had to move, there was a lot of tear soup simmering in that house. Some days when you're making tear soup, it's even hard to breathe. Some days you'll feel like running away. You just hope a better day comes along soon. And then comes one of the hardest parts of making tear soup. It's when you decide it may be okay to eat something else instead of soup all the time. The next morning, as Grandy was cleaning up, Chester asked her if she was done making tear soup. Well, I don't think you actually ever finish. The hard work of making this batch of soup is almost done, though. I'll put the rest in the freezer and we'll pull it out from time to time to have a little taste. So what else have you learned by making tear soup, Grandy? I've learned that grief, like a pot of soup, changes the longer it simmers and the more things you put into it. I've learned that sometimes people say unkind things, but they don't really mean to hurt you. And most importantly, I've learned that there is something down deep within all of us ready to help us survive the things we think we can't survive. Randy, you know so much. What will I do after you die? Don't worry, I'll leave you my recipe for tear soup. I'm going to share the presentation.
I just want to quickly say that I've never heard that story before, and it was so beautiful. So beautiful.
It's pardon me, let me see here. Can you see the screen?
See your screen. Yeah.
If somebody is watching, can you just let me know that you can see the slides show? The last time I did this, there was a bit of an issue with anyone? Okay, so I'm just going to do a very brief kind of introduction to the idea of what is grief. The reason why I told that story, because I think it just so beautifully shares this idea of what grief is in a way of not, that I'll go through in these slides, but certainly I think the story just really speaks to what grief is in terms of our tear soup. Grief is an intense emotional internal response to loss, which is why grief comes in lots of forms, right? It's to any sense of loss that we might have. I know people who grieve divorce, as mentioned in the story, but also grief in terms of like if we move or the ending of relationships or things changing, right? Changing jobs can sometimes bring about retirement, can bring about this sense of loss of identity, loss of purpose and meaning in our life. But of course, the biggest grief is when we lose people that we love. And it comes with all the emotions. And so, there's many grief theories that are out there, one of which Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the work of David Kessler, David Kessler being still alive and working on it, talking about the stages. And really the stages aren't steps. It's not like you move from one to the next. I kind of think it more like a messy mix, like a ball of yarn that a cat's been playing with that's all over the place. Sometimes we feel shock, even when we are expecting it, meaning it's anticipated, but it can be still shocking to our system. There can be anger, there can be guilt, sadness, but there's also moments of other things all mixed in there and very much related to the relationship that we had with the person. And I think it's really important that although grief and the emotions that we carry might be similar for each of us, grief has its own imprint. It's as distinctive and as unique as the person we lost. And I think that's really important. I know other people perhaps have experienced the loss of both of their parents like I did. And I was speaking to someone the other day where, often we have different relationships with our parents. And so maybe we're closer to one than we were the other. And so even in that, as we're thinking about, well, I lost both my parents, but yet my feelings, right, the grief that I have about it is so different. And that's normal. The truth is, grief is as individual as love. Every life, every path is unique. And I think it's really important to remember that there is no predictable pattern, no linear progression. I love this idea in this story where she said, although the hard work of the grief of making the tear soup was done, she knew that it was never, and there was no end to it, that occasionally she would take it out and she would have to have a sip of the soup again, putting it away in the freezer for a later time. One of my, favorite theories of grief is actually the dual model process of coping with bereavement, which is very clinical and not. So you can see this here, and I'm going to explain it in my own way. That we live in a world of linear time, where we have appointments and we have, clocks that tell us we should be here and we should be there. And that's really what I will call linear time. And grief is actually part of what I'm going to call sacred time. And it's very much this loss oriented. It's where there isn't the same sense of time, where it's very much emotional. It's very much about processing what we're feeling, and kind of, days or weeks can go by and we don't even remember really what happened, because we're very much in this sacred space of time. This is also an important period of time to allow ourselves space to be in this, because this really is about breaking the ties or the bonds that we have to that relationship, or reforging those bonds in a new way, because it's moving away potentially from, depending on the loss, in this case we're talking about bereavement, from a physical to physical relationship with someone to a physical to spiritual relationship with someone, where they don't exist in body anymore, but they still exist in terms of our spiritual connection to them. And so it's really important when we're grieving to move in and out of these two things. And often the pain that people suffer is in the transition, because it doesn't feel good to move from one to the other. We attend to the life changes, the linear time where, okay, we got to start to move into doing things again. And it can be a helpful distraction. It can give us some sense of purpose and connection and support again. And so moving between these two spaces becomes a bit problematic or a little challenging to ourselves, but being in one or the other, both being really important as we're grieving. And certainly, like in the tear soup, this changes over time. It changes. The truth is, there is happiness after loss. And that's an important thing, especially as we're talking about today, grief during the holidays. It almost feels like sometimes that we have to be sorrowful, and that if we're feeling sorrow, that's all that we can feel. And in fact, we're complex in terms of our emotions, just like grief is complex. And so it's nuanced. We can feel many things, and finding gratitude for what we have and what we had if we make that choice. Grief and gratitude is often the same, two sides of the same coin. And it's okay to feel joy this holiday season, or to have moments of feeling it at least. Happiness doesn't diminish how much you love or miss your deceased loved one. It's really important to remember that. In fact, joy allows us to really feel connected potentially to all of who we've known and loved. I think it's, as noted in that story, that beautiful story, it's remembering that the object of grieving is not to get over it or to come to some place where we're like, okay, I'm done. It's actually to learn to move through the emotional turmoil and to integrate this loss into our lives and into our heart. And so it's really then questioning, how do I find a new way to connect to our loved ones? How can I shift this relationship from what was this physical to physical into something that is physical to spiritual? I'm using that word in a very wide range for people, please. So during this holiday season, how can you create a loving and nurturing environment for yourself and for your other loved ones who remain? I think it's really important, and we're going to talk about many of these things in more depth over the next little bit, but things are going to get tough potentially. You're going to have tough moments, tough days even. And so make a plan for how you can cope in a healthy way. Healthy coping strategies is fundamental. Set aside self-care as preventative. So making sure that you take time out of your day, your week, to take care of yourself, because that will enable you to manage that emotional turmoil in a healthier way. And give yourself permission to feel the feels. Your emotions are not wrong, and it will pass. Emotions don't last forever. They're waves. They will crest and fall. They may come back again, but that it will also pass. So if you've had a loss that's recent, so in this past year or so, remember that this year will not be like past years. But that doesn't mean it has to be bad. Prepare, allow the emotion, avoid isolation, and we'll go through some of the other strategies that you can employ. And I'm going to leave it before I pass it over to Chantel on this, is like, comparison is the thief of joy. I love this quote. Comparison is the thief of joy. When we start to compare this experience to what it was before, that's when we create suffering for ourselves, because the expectation might be completely unrealistic to what we are able to do. It's simply, as always, allowing ourselves to be in the present moment, to be with what we are feeling, to validate that, to provide comfort and support to ourselves, but to also know that as we move through the bereavement process, it will change. It will continue to change each time. And even though it might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years for you, since the significant people in your life have died, sometimes, especially during the holidays, we take the soup out of the freezer and have a bowl of it. And that's okay. That's part of the process of remembering those we love and the impact that they've had on our life. So with that, I'm going to pass it over now to Chantel.
Thank you. You know what, though? I just need to figure out how to quickly, I can move that slideshow, or I can just let you. You can
Yeah,
just
sorry, you tell me
Well,
and I will.
No worries. Okay, so I am excited to talk to you all a little bit about values, traditions, and rituals, and the difference between them, and how they can impact our grief. So it's not a surprise that holidays occupy such a unique space in our minds and our memories. For myself, I don't often remember. If you ask me what I did last week, can't tell you, but I definitely remember being a young girl on Christmas morning and being so excited when I would wake up and know that Santa had come, and that feeling I had running downstairs to see what he had left for me under the tree and what would be in my stocking, and always knowing that at the very, very bottom of my Christmas stocking would be one of those little Christmas oranges, and never fail. So I look back on those traditions and rituals that we had years and years ago when I was a child, and they still just have such a warm place in my heart. So I think we all have things like that we can look back
Yes
on.
to the oranges. Yes to the oranges.
Did everybody have Christmas oranges in their stockings? Because I thought it was just us. I thought it was the special thing that Santa did for us, but I guess not. So
No, and stockings were always the best.
stockings are the best. So whether we're looking back in memory or looking forward to the holidays in the future, we often go straight to those little details like we were just talking about. We remember the who, the when, the where of the holidays. We think back to the homes that we were in, who was gathered around us when we were having these holiday moments, what we were eating at the dinner table, the memories that we were all sharing in together. Now, when we look to the holidays coming up, the plans that we focus on are the same. Who are we going to gather with? Where will we go? What will we do? It makes sense that we find comfort in these details. The traditions and rituals bring us connection to the past. They give us a sense of predictability, of stability, and belonging. Now, after a loss, though, traditions might have to change. Part of coping with the holidays as we grieve is planning for the traditions that we will keep, those that we will change, and those that we may decide to leave behind. So let's talk about holiday values. So what are your holiday values? Values give us a sense of meaning and purpose. Sometimes we're super conscious of our values, and other times we get so caught up in the what we're doing that we forget why we're doing it. The values that guide your holidays are unique to you and your family. Taking a step back to connect with our values can shift our focus, to remind us of the meaning and the purpose behind the traditions and rituals that have become so important to us over the years. Some examples of holiday values might be family, faith, generosity, spirituality, maybe volunteering or doing some service work. So now I would invite you to take a few minutes to sit with yourself and think about some of what your holiday values might be. If you want to pop them in the chat, go ahead and feel free, or if you just want to write them out on a piece of paper in your journal, you can just go ahead and do that. So what are some of your holiday values? So we have connection, generosity, love, and food, although I think food could be considered a value. I value foods. Can't live without it, so absolutely. For me, what comes up for my main values are spirituality and generosity and kindness, and especially kindness this time of year. I was out last night and made the trip to Costco. You know, it's always busy this time of year. It's busy all the time, especially on a Friday night this close to the holiday season. And I was helping people. I could hear people, you hear other conversations and someone's like, oh, do you know where the Vaseline is? And they're asking somebody else, but I would overhear it and I would tell them, where's the Vaseline? And, oh, here, I can help you. And a lady saw something in my cart and she's like, "Oh, where did you find this?" I'm like, "Here, you take this one. I'll go get another one." So little things like that, knowing that people are just so stressed this time of year. So for me, that's something I focus on a lot. I try to do that all the time, but especially during the holidays when people get so frazzled. So, okay, so I'm hoping that you've come up with some other values for yourself. So now once you've identified those values, we can use them as a compass. You can use them to help you move forward in ways that feel best for you. So something I want to be clear about, that the holidays might always feel bittersweet, no matter what we do to try to adapt. Things will be different. And that's where the why becomes so crucial. When we ask the why, when we look at our holiday values, we can shift and we can evolve, and then we can build our legacy through that. So not just what the value is, but why is that value so important to us? So now that we've talked a little bit about values, we're going to talk about traditions. So somebody has died. Now it's a holiday season. Now what do I do? Right? We're faced with that. Too often, I think people, they stumble into the holidays after death and they believe that things can stay the same. They secretly hope that, oh, we can just do things exactly the same way. Some people just possibly assume that everything will work out. No, I'm not going to worry about it. It's just going to be fine. Other people try so hard to be positive and keep things exactly the same. And they almost force, no matter what, we're going to have a great time. Things are going to be just like they used to be. That's a lot of expectation to have on ourselves. So it's those moments where we can see how much things have changed. We realize the traditions that we can't possibly maybe carry forward or choose to not carry forward. And it can be hard to see anything else when we're thinking about that. We often sometimes may think that if the holidays can't be the way that they used to be, then there can't be any meaning in them. And I would challenge you on that thinking. So let's think about family traditions. Are there any traditions that you're dreading this year, that you're nervous about? Can you maybe think of a way to lessen that? Are there maybe some traditions that you're excited about? Not sure how you might approach them, but they were important traditions to you and your family, and you would like to continue on with them. So maybe cutting down a fresh Christmas tree, or making gingerbread houses, going Christmas caroling, decorating, making homemade ornaments for your Christmas tree, going tobogganing. So those are some examples of traditions. And it can be difficult to uphold the really big family traditions. So don't underestimate the value in the little ones. So let's take a couple minutes now and think about what are some of your traditions that you have that you are excited about continuing this year. And again, if you want to pop in the chat, feel free, or just go ahead and write them down in your journal.
I love this question. Can I share a story?
I would love for you to share a story, Glenda, please.
Like I think many families, we had definitely our traditions growing up. And after I guess my mom was the second person to die. My dad had died, and I think my mom and I and my daughter tried to kind of do the same thing that year, especially knowing my mom was sick and it was her last year. But it didn't feel quite the same. But I'm going to say we kind of forced it a little bit. And I mean, obviously, it had beautiful moments in it because my mom was still there. But the subsequent probably 5 years, we didn't celebrate Christmas, and I mean we by my daughter and I in particular. And so I remember my first year moving back west, and I went to Edmonton, and I spent it with my brother. And I was shocked that he did Christmas down to a T as we did growing up. And I was just like, wow, like everything, like from the courtier, which we always had on Christmas, to like the breakfast, which is like, what you eat on breakfast morning, which was always a tradition in my family. And so it kind of enlivened me again to go, okay, like you don't have to just pretend that this doesn't exist, right? That in fact you get to do something about it and recreate. And so one of the things that we always got on what we always did on Christmas Eve was we would always get to open a Christmas gift, one Christmas gift on Christmas Eve. And inevitably, I mean, at the time I didn't realize this, but it was always new pajamas that you could
me
then wear,
too.
right? Of course, took me years later of like, clearly my mother had a plan, but I'm like, how did we always pick that one, right? Kind of idea. And I still do that. So I literally just ordered pajamas and for myself, and I will wrap them and open them, and I'll get some from my husband. And I don't know what it is. It's just like such a beautiful little gift, right? Of like that feeling back into that moment. Yeah. And then always have food for me. I wrote about food, like I have lobster rolls on Christmas Eve because growing up in the Maritimes, and that's what we did. And so these food elements certainly kind of tie in, for at least in my house, for a tradition. Shortbread cookies, like these kinds of things that just are that connection to my family and my roots.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. I was thinking about it just now before you popped on, Glenda, and my mom and dad got divorced when I was 10. And so, in regards to my dad and family Christmas traditions, there's not a lot that I have in that respect. And same with my brother. So in noting that, what about starting new traditions to honor our loved ones? I know when the first year my dad had passed away, as I was sorting through his things, he had a lot of like Christmas ornaments that I'm sure they were very special to him, but I wasn't putting them on my tree anyway. But he had one little cute little golfer dude. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. My dad loved to golf. He traveled the world golfing, and I love to golf with him. And so now every Christmas I take out that little golfer guy and I hang him on my tree, and it makes me think of my dad. And then this year I bought a little ornament. My brother loved polar bears. Like, he was fascinated by polar bears. He traveled up north to see polar bears. And I looked last year and I could not find, the only polar bear ornament I could find were the like Coca-Cola polar bear ornaments. And I was like, that's not what I had in mind. This year I found just this wooden polar bear, and he's covered in all like mystic, like stars and moons and little, like it's the most beautiful thing. And as soon as I saw it, I fell in love with it. So now that'll be my brother on my Christmas tree every year. So that's a new tradition, is to hang those ornaments. Is maybe you could donate your time or money to an organization that was important to your loved one. The other day I heard a family that they get together, they hang up their stockings, and everybody sits down and writes a letter to the person who's passed away, and they put it in the stocking, they pack it away, and then the following year, they hang up that stocking, they read those letters, they gather, read the letters out loud, and then they write another letter and put it in the stocking. And I think that would be such
Wow,
a
wow.
great way. And you would see like the growth that you would
Mm.
see as you are processing and working through the challenge of not having your loved one there, right? I think you would really notice it by doing something like that. So I thought that was also a very, very
Lovely.
beautiful idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Leanne has something to say or a question, but I'm going to allow you to talk. So I'm going to put her on. Hi, Leanne. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Am I here?
Yep.
You're here.
Yeah, I was
Hi.
gonna type it, but it says chat disabled, so.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
shoot.
weird.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did the Christmas stocking thing too, and it's one of the last Christmases we had with my dad at home because he had dementia. It was my brother proposed to my sister-in-law. He put the ring in a little toy, those things you pull out of the vending machine, those little toy plastic things.
Mhm.
And we didn't know this. We didn't know he was going to do this, and he proposed to my sister-in-law the year before my dad went into Pioneer Village. And it was, my dad was so shocked he just dropped everything that he was taking out of the stocking because he had the biggest stocking. It was about 3 feet high. And everybody was so shocked, and it was such a happy moment. So I always think of that on Christmas Eve, just to look on my mom and my dad's faces when they saw Jason get down on one knee after she finally fished this thing out of the bottom of the stocking. It was pretty nice.
Oh, that sounds amazing. How fun. Thank you for sharing that, Leanne. Thank you so much. Okay, again, this is being so beneficial to me. I realized my brother loves snowboarding, and I actually, his wife gave me his snowboard. And I think that I should actually start snowboarding. I'm thinking, as I'm learning to snowboard and falling down in the snow, and I can just picture my brother looking down, laughing his butt off at me as I crash. So I think that's actually a new tradition that I'm gonna start now. So
Be sure to add some padding to the butt because
I need so much. I used to have more padding. Now I'm losing some of it. So it's not as good. But yeah, it's one of those things. My brother had such a quirky sense of humor, and he would laugh at the silliest things. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about that. So wonderful. So coming back to these traditions, I think the reality is no matter how hard that we try to recreate the traditions and keep them the same as they were, there will likely be sadness around that. So if we can just adjust our expectations around what those traditions might look like, we can open ourselves up to it and allow them just to be what they are, and know that they are perfectly okay, whatever that looks like. So and thank you Glenda and Leanne for popping on and sharing a little bit also. So now let's talk about rituals, because they are a little bit different than traditions. So rituals are also an important part of our healing process. They provide order to the chaos of grief. Usually they involve more distinctive ingredients like candles, food, a special space, or a special place. They speak to our hearts and they legitimize our emotions while forcing us to focus on the present. So we all, whether we realize it or not, have little rituals that we perform throughout the day. I think almost everybody does anyway, without thinking about that. For me, for example, nighttime, I brush and floss my teeth, I wash my face and moisturize, I put on my lip balm, I say goodnight to my puppy, and I do it in that exact same order. So that would be a ritual of sorts. Some people have a specific piece of jewelry that they put on. At Christmas, there's always like you see older ladies, they always have a certain like little Santa brooch that they wear, or a special outfit that they wear for certain occasions. Some people have a specific way that they make their bed every morning. My in-laws, they're so adorable. They take turns every day making their bed, and they always rearrange the pillows in different patterns because they've got a lot of like little shaped pillows, and they always come up with different ideas, and they try to outdo each other on how the pillows are going to be arranged. And so then they're so excited, they go upstairs and see how the other person rearranged the pillows. So it's so sweet that, all these years of doing it, and they're still so excited about their pillows on their bed. It makes me laugh. So those are rituals. So they provide a certain order to an existence that otherwise might be full of confusion and chaos. And it sounds like the chat is fixed now. So thank you for that, Glenda. Human life is full of confusion and uncertainty as it is. And undoubtedly, the most chaotic times in our lives are the times when we are grieving. Grief, it's chaos. Times of grief are when we need ritual the most. Creating your own personal rituals to remember your loved ones allows you to access and work through your grief in a safe and constructive way. Some people plan rituals to honor a loved one's birthday or an anniversary. Others choose to express their grief through small daily or weekly rituals. A ritual can be as elaborate as a public memorial service, or as small and as quiet as a moment alone, just sitting looking at your loved one's picture. When my dad died, I inherited his dining room table. And now every time when I sit down and have a meal at that table, I sit down and I look up and I say, thank you, Dad. For me, that's a ritual. It reminds me of my dad. And it's the simplest thing. And I know Todd kind of looks at me, he's like every time you're like, thank your dad every time. I'm like, yeah, that keeps me connected to him. And I can't imagine that I will ever get rid of that table now. And it's not my favorite table. It's not even my style of table, but it was my dad's table. And it's that connection that we can have with them in those little things, no matter how small. So some other examples of rituals, maybe lighting a special candle at a certain time of the day or week to remind you of your loved one, or spending some time listening to their style of music, maybe if it's something that you normally wouldn't listen to. Maybe creating a memory book or planting a tree in their memory, or again, going to their burial site, wherever there's maybe a headstone for them. So now I'm going to ask you to take some time to think about some rituals that you might like to begin, something that feels good for you, that will help you connect to your loved one, but not feel overwhelmed. Or if you already have some rituals, maybe now you've got a couple ideas and you might want to elaborate on them a little bit. So, again, if you want to type in the chat that we fixed, or just go ahead and write them down.
I've shared this before, but I believe in the power of, I'm going to say, mundane rituals. And I mean mundane in like the simplest of things that can be turned into a ritual. Because I think sometimes, like, obviously, my parents are buried in New Brunswick, so obviously I can't go down the street and go to their, and my husband, I guess, that's who he is, his late partner died, and they scattered her ashes. So one of the things that we did was we planted a tree, for instance, in her honor, and so that he kind of has that as this remembrance and can create a bit of a ritual around that. It's a lilac tree as well, so then when you smell the lilacs, it becomes more of this daily ritual kind of thing. For me, and I've shared this story before, in my household, my parents, Irish, Canadian, East Coast, we drank a lot of tea. In fact, tea was just this thing. You would go into anybody's home, if anybody's from the East Coast and can probably appreciate this. The first thing you do is you have either you already have a big pot of tea brewing, or you just put on the kettle and make some more. And my dad was a big tea drinker. And it was just this thing we always did when you wanted to have a conversation or you needed to have a family meeting about something. there was always like gathering around the kitchen table and having a cup of tea. And so I obviously, for me, I drink tea later in the day. And so sometimes the act of drinking tea will pull me into the ritual of remembering them. But sometimes I do it the other way, which is, I want to connect to them. So I'll make a cup of tea and sit and kind of be in that remembrance of it. So I think rituals can kind of pull us in either direction of things, if you will. Like you, Chantal, I bought my husband a little angel ornament for the tree. And so I usually decorate the tree, but I always leave that for him to kind of put on. Although sometimes he helps, but I like it. I like it a certain way. So, but he does get to add that. And so sometimes I think those simple things are just ways of connecting, right? Allowing us to connect. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Glenda. So yeah, grief rituals can be a wonderful way, like we're saying, just to honor your loved one, right? To just remember and reflect on their life and to develop a new type of connection with them, right? The best rituals are meaningful to you and to you alone, whatever that looks like. It will be different for everybody. So we encourage you, take some time when you're done here and think of ways that you can develop personal rituals that will have the most meaning for you, and with that meaning a healing for you. And again, whether they're simple or detailed, the rituals that we engage in tell stories about who we are, who we want to be, and what is important to us in our lives. Yeah, so that was my little I think we talked about those, some of the rituals. Yeah, so that's what I have for you on traditions and rituals and values over the holiday. So do you want to take a quick moment here, Glenda, before we go in?
Yeah, why don't we'll
Does that
switch
work for
those
you?
two things?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
If that's not throwing you off.
No, I can wing it. Okay, just give me a second here though, because I have too many screens open and looking for something.
I just don't talk quite too much. I'm still getting over my cold, and I find if I think a bit of a coughing is starting to come on. So if I take a bit of a break, then I'll give you the mic for a few minutes. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to do a little bit of a practice. And then we're going to come back and we'll go over the holiday pact and we'll have a conversation about that. And then we're going to take a break. And then we'll come back and we'll do a couple of more practices. So before I begin, I wanted to share this little book called Healing After Loss. This book actually is daily meditations for working through grief, and it was actually a grief client of mine that had gotten it from a friend, and so I thought I'd read today's little meditation as a beginning point. So December 10th, even as I stood there, the tears streaming down my face, I felt a kind of joy for him, a strange gaiety almost, that he would so soon be released, and I had a sense that he stood now on the threshold of some great adventure. So it was a strange way, not only a time of terrible sorrow, but a moment of light as I stood there telling him goodbye. It was my father who lay on the bed dying. I had expected the sorrow. Though I have faith in a life beyond death, I had not expected the strange rush of happiness, the expectation of adventure and joy, not right then. So is all the more a gift, though a fleeting one. None of us knows what lies on the other side of death, but we have had clues. and stories handed down and experiences of our own, and books detailing near-death experiences that offer great hope and promise that beyond death are light and welcome and unimaginable peace and joy. What comfort those clues can be to us on the dark days. We pore over them as over rosary beads. Yes, we think hope is justified. Everything will turn out right in the end. In my times of darkness, lead me to the light. I invite you to take a moment now. We're going to do a practice called pendulation. And the therapist in me wants to explain this a little bit. This is a beautiful practice when we feel overwhelmed by an emotion. So when we feel overwhelmed or that there's a real sense of one emotion over another, this is a great practice. And pendulation, remember those, like the balls, the swinging back and forth. And so it allows us to remember that although grief in the moment of sadness or sorrow can feel overwhelming and it feels like that's all we're feeling, that there are other things present as well. And it allows us to come into this other sense of, I'm going to say, balance with our emotions that allows us to be with those overwhelming feelings in a different way. So I invite you now to just, if you feel comfortable to do so, closing your eyes and finding that comfortable seat. And I want you to, looking inward, ask yourself, what does my grief feel like today? For some, it might be sadness, perhaps sorrow, anger, longing, maybe even a tinge of joy as you think about, we just had these conversations about rituals and traditions that might bring up these happy memories for us. I want you to feel into it for a moment, like really kind of focus on that emotion, whatever it may have been for you. Where is it in your body? Where do you feel it the most? What does it feel like? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Texture? Sound? Allowing yourself to just feel into it as much as possible, whatever feels comfortable. Okay, now I want you to think of what the opposite of that feeling is. If it's sorrow, perhaps it's joy, anger, love, longing, connection, whatever it may be for you. Think of the opposite and search for that in your body. Where can you feel that emotion in your body right now? Sometimes it's in that baby toe. You might have to go searching for it. Allow it to fill your experience, your full awareness. Where do you feel it in your body? And releasing it and going back to the first grief emotion, feeling into that. Releasing it, going back to the opposite, feeling into that with your each breath. Now taking an inhale and an exhale, be with the first emotion. And with your own breath, allowing yourself to move into the opposite and back and forth a few times, allowing yourself to sit with each through one breath. And releasing. And you hold both of these emotions at the same time, wherever you might feel them in your body. Can you bring them into your awareness at the same time? And you feel both with your whole body, allowing your sense of awareness to be your whole body and feeling into both of these emotions at the same time, allowing space for them. And then just allowing your attention to flow back into your heart space. Perhaps even bringing a hand to that area. And allow yourself to breathe into your hand from your heart. For those who like visuals, perhaps feeling loving, white, radiant energy flowing into your heart and out of your heart through your body and all around you. Noticing how you feel in this moment, what sensations or emotions or thoughts might be present. We want to attend to them, but doing so from a place of observation and not judgment. We're not trying to change anything, but simply to give some space for it. For many people, they feel grief in their chest, their heart. There's a heaviness that people describe to me. Often it's from not breathing fully, not allowing ourselves space. Sometimes just allowing a little bit of space allows the tension to soften, and we can feel into the love in our heart again. You can release your hand once again, and whenever you're ready, coming back into this time and space. You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is you will never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up. And you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals quite perfectly, but that still hurts when the weather gets cold and you learn to dance with the limp. A beautiful quote by Anne Lamont. So I am going to Just give me a moment, Chantal, and I will get the next thing up. I'm going to share it with everybody in the chat.
Yep, I see it there.
And I will put it up for you.
Thank you. So this is called Grief at the Holidays Pact. And this, where did this originate from?
What's your grief.com?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I
So
think I made some adjustments to it. So I said, I did give credit at the end, adapted from What's Your Grief. Yeah.
So we're going to go through these together now, just one at a time. We're going to take a couple minutes with each one to give you an opportunity just to reflect on that each element of the pact and what that looks like for you, and give you an opportunity to make it your own. Okay, so let's start with the first one. You acknowledge that you have the right to feel what you feel. Plain and simple. Grief causes such new and intense emotions, right? Many people tell us they feel like they're going crazy in the weeks and months following a loss of somebody that they love. And as we've talked about many of these feelings and how they can manifest, we've shared a lot of them already. Shock, numbness, sadness, despair, increased or decreased appetite, isolation, fatigue, guilt, regret, depression, crying, headaches, aches and pains, worries, frustration, detachment, isolation. So there is a whole heck of a lot of feelings that you might have that come along with that grief. So just acknowledging that you're going to feel what you're going to feel, and that's okay. Don't judge your feelings. Give them as much space as you possibly can. It's okay and normal to feel what you feel, even on a holiday, especially on a holiday, right? So let's acknowledge that we all have the right to feel what we feel. And of course, if there's anything, if you have any thoughts or questions on any of these as we go through them, again, feel free just to pop something in the chat. Okay, so let's go into the second one here. You acknowledge that you have the right to decide how you want to spend your holidays. We've talked about a lot about traditions and values in the last little bit here. So know that it's okay to do things differently. It's okay to opt out of things. It's okay to go slow and pace yourself as you move through the holidays. It's okay to honor and remember your loved one in whatever way feels right for you, however you like. You might need to give yourself a little bit of patience and compromise, understanding with yourself and with other people, with your family members and what they might be going through. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have the right to spend the holidays however you think is best for you in whatever way is going to make you feel peaceful. So this year, next year, all the years going forward, you can decide to do what feels best for you.
On that note, I know Chantal, you and I were talking about this, but I thought it would be and I'll try to find the article and share it, but there was recently an article. It was about American Thanksgiving, and it was a story about how someone's father had died just leading up to American Thanksgiving, and how the tradition was that they would go to his family's house for Thanksgiving every year. So the family the next Thanksgiving, got in the car and everybody went, and they said it was horrible. Like everybody was crying and upset and it didn't feel right. And so they were having this conversation afterwards, like, this doesn't feel right for us, right? And so they never did it again. So the 10 years later in the article said, they tried to find other ways of reconnecting, but it just didn't feel right. And so it just became less of an importance of a holiday, if you will, than others. And at the same time, other people find the opposite is true, which is connecting to and redoing all the things gives them comfort, right? So if anything, I think these pacts or the pact and these elements are about give yourself permission to try and see what works for you, and also then go, I'm not doing that again, right? Or I love this and let's do more of it, right? And so it might take you a few years to figure out what works for you, but it's okay to completely change and say, I don't want to do it. If you needed permission, there's your permission slip. This is your permission slip.
Yes, that's so true. I was actually what just came to mind for me was around Halloween, because my brother loved Halloween, and he always went. Here in Edmonton, they have like the Deadmonton spooky things that you go through and try to get scared, and I've never been interested, not one iota. Ever would you catch me doing something like that. And this year my girlfriend said, I really would like to go to this thing. Will you come with me? I have a ticket, I'll pay for you, like, let's go. And I begrudgingly went. And but I thought, my brother did this, like, I'll do this, but I'm probably not going to enjoy myself. I'll keep you company. Sure enough, by the end of the evening, I had such an amazing time, and I thought of my brother the whole way through. So now it's one of those things that I enjoyed. That I will go back and do that again, and again, another way to try to stay connected with my brother. So I think like what Glenda had said, it's giving yourself permission to try new things that maybe at one point you didn't like, or you don't think that you would like. You might surprise yourself and then and come up with something new, which is also a beautiful thing. So let's move on to the next one. You acknowledge your right to mourn past holidays. That can be a tricky one, right? We can often just get sad about everything that is now gone, that we don't have any longer, the things that we miss, and we feel our lives are just forever changed. You might have a lot of unexpressed love and feelings. The year that, again, I'm like coming up with this, the year that my brother passed away, we had planned, it was just over Christmas holidays, and he and I were going to go to my mom's house for Christmas, and it was going to be our first time as adult children spending Christmas morning with her. And he unfortunately fell ill and was in the hospital over the holidays. And so we never had that. And that's something I struggle with. And I know my mom struggles with that too, because that was something that we never had. And now we will never have it that way. Right. And so it's okay to feel sad about that, and acknowledge that loss, right? Just mourn that past holiday, whatever that looked like, or never was. So, but I am, if I'm
sorry.
I'll quickly say to that before, and then jump in, Glenda, please. My mom is actually coming to my house this year.
Oh, nice.
And spending the night. And yeah, so it will be, we'll definitely tie in my brother in there somehow for Christmas morning. I'm not sure how yet, but so I'm pretty excited about that. So again, in the loss of a tradition that we may have possibly had with my brother, we are now gaining a new tradition that is ours in its own special way too. And so and that's the good and the beauty coming out of that loss also, which I'm so grateful for. So yeah.
That's the gratitude of potential connection then with other people who share that. Related to this, because I think it kind of makes sense to say this, my experience, both personally, but also working with people, is that, and people watching this might experience this, that the mourning doesn't happen on December 24th. That often it starts, I mean, this year, I think it was even before Halloween, Christmas stuff was coming out in the stores, right? Like it starts when, often for people, like weeks or earlier, that they start to feel like some inkling, if you will, right? Some sense of annoyance, anger, often like irritability. Something else will come up and they'll be like, I don't know what's going on with me. And then it's like, oh yeah, like I'm starting to feel all the feelings weeks beforehand. I mean, I've often told the story of Mother's Day is a nightmare for me. Not now, but the first few Mother's Days after my mother died, I would get angry. I would be annoyed because people start, everybody's like, Happy Mother's Day. You just see Mother's Day everywhere. And you get emails, inundation of emails from people about Mother's Day, like all of the sales and everything. I'm like, just stop, right? I don't want to hear about it. I would like to pretend it's not happening. Even to the point where I know my own daughter was like, yeah, we're just gonna, it's a Hallmark holiday, we're not gonna celebrate, right? Like we're just agreeing to just forget about it, kind of thing. So people, it isn't just about the holiday itself. I mean, there's this this is also true of death anniversaries, birthdays, all of those things. Often for people, it can be the whole month where they're feeling these feelings, both before and after.
So I feel we spoke about that one quite a bit. So let's give you we'll give you all just a couple of minutes for you to sit with that and acknowledge your right to mourn past holidays. Okay, moving on to the next part of the pact. You agree to communicate. So We know this. No two humans, no two people will ever grieve in the same way. Even people in the same families who are grieving the same loss, they will experience um, different feelings and thoughts around that. Our expectations around holiday rituals, traditions, and celebrations can be fertile ground for family misunderstandings. So the best thing that you can do is have open communication around your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your needs, and most certainly your expectations. Be prepared to negotiate with each other around the things that come up for you and your loved ones. Um, Take the time, if you can, as you're coming into the holiday season, to open up those lines of communication and talk about them, hopefully before they um, grow into something that you don't want to have, um, or that you don't want to experience before they get ugly, if you will. So agree to communicate. Okay, the next one that we have here is you agree to minimize negative coping. When you're worn down and tired or feeling rushed over the holiday season, you're more likely to choose coping mechanisms that can have a negative impact on your health and your well-being. I'm sure you can think of some things, right? Eating comfort foods, isolation, drinking alcohol or using other addictive substances. Um, they might seem like quick and easy, feel better fixes in the moment, but ultimately they're not going to do anything to help you cope with your problems and the feelings that you're having, and they will likely only make you feel worse in the end. So it's important to try to use healthy coping strategies like meditations and breathing strategies that we have shared with you and will share more with you as we go through this presentation. So agree to minimize negative coping strategies. Okay, next on the list, you agree to take care of yourself. Self-care, right? In the midst of all the celebrations and parties and the holiday baking and the drinks that are flowing, it's really tempting just to let your self-care fall by the wayside and indulge in all of those seemingly wonderful things. Coping is more than just processing your feelings. It's also about taking care of yourself. It's really important um, to get a good night's rest, to eat healthy, to move your body, to get emotional support that you might need from friends or family, or from a therapist if that's something that you need. Go for a walk outside, get in nature. That's always a wonderful thing to help you feel better. For me, playing with my puppy, that always makes me feel good. Give yourself a timeout, recharge, do whatever it is that you might need. Curl up with a good book and sit by the fire, whatever that might look like for you. So it's really, really important that you agree to take care of yourself.
Well, I think this is such an important one, which is fundamentally what all the other ones kind of are saying.
Mhm.
I have, I have a client who has a big family, and she would host the gatherings every year, and it was just becoming a lot in her own grief. And one of the things we talked about was, what might you need to feel better in that time? Well, I'd like to just go take a nap, right? or have a time out. And I said, well, why don't you? Well, goodness, I have a house full of people. I said, well, let them know ahead of time. So she did. She let everybody know, I'm kind of struggling. So if you see me go off by myself for a little bit, just don't worry about me. I'll come back and, carry on. And they did. She thought it was going to be such a bigger deal than what it was. But it actually allowed everybody else also to kind of give permission to take care of themselves. So sometimes when we choose to do something for ourselves, we're also giving other people permission that it's okay to take care of ourselves, for sure. Related to that, which is separate, but this is a time of year where there's a lot of alcohol and substances. And so for those of us who don't drink or are sober, there's a lot of tools out there to kind of help. One of the favorites that I love is Sober Girls Society. And so they have a great holiday tool on how to handle it, things to say, things to do, alternative mocktails, and all the rest of it. So even if you're not sober or don't drink, remember that there's lots of people in your life who might be or are choosing this holiday season to not indulge in those things. And so if you're hosting something, is to also think about that and to have alternatives available for people.
That's a great point, actually, because I honestly not consider that when I throw a little gathering. I'm assuming that everybody, eats all the foods and drinks all the drinks, but they don't. And even with foods, right? It's like some people are vegan, some people are vegetarian, or this or that. So yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah. So okay, agree to take care of yourself. And then the last one that we have here is you agree to be mindful of your outlook. So as we've talked about, you're entitled, to feel all the feels, right? All the anger and sadness and bitterness that you want. Feel it all, but remember that even though those feelings are justified, they still come with personal and interpersonal consequences. Many people fail to recognize how over time negativity can impact their overall worldview. When we fall into that cycle of poor me, life is awful, how did this happen, all of those things, it can overflow into everything else that we're looking at, right? And so it's really important to change your mindset, and with changing your mindset, you can change your world. So look for ways to connect to gratitude and love and kindness as a way of soothing yourself and finding more compassion for yourself and for the other people around you, for your loved ones. So agree to be mindful of your outlook.
You're here. Shifting our mindset isn't always so easy, especially when we're deep into kind of that victim mentality. But you don't have to change it radically. You just simply need to start leaning into the opposite, almost like that pendulation, right? It's like, okay, I'm feeling anger here. Okay, how do I kind of just allow myself to feel some love, as an example, or compassion? And it's like, I'm filled with sorrow. How do I just allow a little bit of joy? And joy doesn't have to be this external experience of pleasure, but really this innate sense of joy that can come from just being connected to ourselves and the fact that we're alive. You know, the one thing about sensing grief or being with grief is that we connect to our own mortality.
Absolutely.
Mhm. I love this pact. Those of you who, and I know like Leanne and others might have done this program with me previously, I include it every year because I think it really just wraps it all up in, like, it's okay to do these things differently, but you have to take care of yourself and to really be, I'm going to say, intentional perhaps around how we move through this period of time. And that there is things that we can do to kind of help ourselves in terms of managing or regulating our emotions, being more mindful of it, but also just being okay with communicating to people around what our choices are related to the holiday. Like, I'm not celebrating this year. And that's okay. You know, no one said you had to. You know, I know people who aren't, and I wanted to make this note because I think it's actually an important one that I was reminded of earlier today, that this is a strange time. I'm going to call it strange time for people, regardless of their religious beliefs. So I know people who are, say, Jewish, for instance, that Christmas is actually a hard time of year. Why? Because we're filled with holiday memories, movies, stories all about family time, and that this is a time of gathering. So even though from a religious perspective, they may not celebrate Christmas, we're kind of, I'm going to say, fed a story about what this time of year means. And so don't assume, right, that people aren't grieving their losses simply because they don't celebrate Christmas, because that may or may not be true. They may actually be feeling the sense of loss around family, for instance, more significantly because no one's thinking of them because they're like, oh, they don't celebrate Christmas kind of thing, right? So they might be feeling it even more so. Okay, I'm going to stop that for a moment. So we're going to take a break in a few minutes, but before break, I wanted to just cover a few things so that when we come back from break, we can be kind of set up for things, okay? So one is the practice we're going to do after break. You have a choice to do laying down or seated. So if you're going to do it laying down, I just wanted to give you a heads up because you might have to reorient your room and space or computer or whatnot. It is a beautiful practice. It'll be probably 20-ish minutes, maybe even 30 minutes of a practice. So if you're in a chair that you feel comfortable to sit in, great. If you want to go lie down on a couch or a bed, great. And just have access to your computer or phone or whatever you might be watching this on. And so think about what that might look like for you, given the time that we'll be doing it, and adjust yourself accordingly at break. Before we leave, I wanted to share a couple more resources with people, just so you know they have them. So one of the books is How to Live When a Loved One Dies by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is a beautiful little book. It's again like kind of these shorter kind of synopses, little essays, if you will. A beautiful, I mean, most of his books are beautiful. So actually, many people grieved the loss of him this year. Another one, Coping with Grief, also another like short little book. It's a little bit more I'm gonna say academic, if you know what I mean, like it's not academic, but it's a little bit more that way. But some people like that. There's also a whole bunch of resources in here. So great little book. One of my teachers is Grieving Mindfully, Dr. Kumar. It talks more about what grief is, but also then some acknowledgements about mindfully grieving. So Dr. Kumar is actually, he works out of Florida. He's a Buddhist and a psychologist, but he runs a program of a cancer care unit. So he works with cancer patients, most of whom are terminal. And so that's kind of his perspective. And it's a beautiful book. And then two books that aren't academic in nature. One of my favorite grief teachers, which is Frances Weller, who does initiations in sorrow. And this book is The Wild Edge of Sorrow. I've done some work related to this, Rituals of Renewal and the Sacred Work of Grief, which he talks about the 5 gateways of grief. So again, this isn't just about bereavement, but also other areas of our life that initiate us into grief, perhaps before we have a significant loss in our life. As this teacher, perhaps, if you will, of how to be with it. And then the last one is The Smell of Rain on Dust. Beautiful book, Martin Pretchell, and it's on grief and praise. So often, I know people probably have heard me many times talk about grief and gratitude as kind of these things that we talk about together, and part of that comes from this book, or the nature of this. And so depending on where you are in your own journey, and I know people often ask, like, what are the resources? What can I do? So I wanted to share some of that. What's Your Grief is a beautiful resource website. They have tons of things on it. They have articles, older articles, newer articles on how to kind of ideas on how to be with it, or to support other people who are grieving this time of year. So I offer that as some resources available to you. So let's take a break right now. We're going to take 20 minutes. So I have 10 to 12 for those of you not in my time zone, like Chantel, that's 10 to 11, and wherever else you might be. We're going to take 20 minutes and then we'll come back and do a practice, and then we'll open for the sharing circle. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and we will be back soon. I will be playing some music in the background, which is a sound bowl done by Carrie Dory, my dear friend Carrie, who did a grief evening, a conversation series of our grief evening last October. And so I offer this to you. Hi, everybody. I hope you're back. If you're not, that's okay. We'll take a minute. I love that sound bath. I'll make sure that everyone has it available to them. Carrie is a wonderful friend, and he's done a couple of sound baths. In fact, for those who are interested and have the time, if they come to the winter solstice celebration on the 22nd, we'll be doing a sound bath as part of that with Carrie. But this one we did last October, November, we did a conversation series on grief and gratitude, where one night we talked about grief, and then the next night we talked, or the next session we talked about gratitude, and part of the grief one was this sound bath. And so it was done at Halloween time, but it's still a beautiful thing. So I wanted to do a practice now, because I think who couldn't use a little bit of nourishment on this cold winter day for most of us here in the West. Winter came fast and furious this year, but also as a way of, we're going to do a few things in this practice. And so I wanted you to have the experience of it, to see what you liked about it, so that as you need nourishment or self-care coming into this holiday season, you could then decide what might be good for you, having had the experience of it. And so know that you will have access to links for many of these things that I do. They might not be the exact same, although you'll have the recording of this. You'll also have shorter practices of pendulation that's like a 3-minute that you can kind of just be with when you need a break, or a body scan, or a yoga nidra practice, or all of these things that you'll have access to as other ways of helping you do self-care this year. Not all of them you're going to like, and that's okay. That's why I'm trying to show you quite a few things, so that you can go, I like this works for me. Okay, I'll pick and choose and create your own kind of menu options for yourself. I'm just looking to see if I actually had notes to say anything else, but if I do, it'll come to me and I'll do it at the end. So I invite you now to just take a moment and get comfortable, again, in whatever way that makes sense for you today, whether it's lying down or in a seated position. If it's seated, just kind of be in your seat for a moment and kind of go, okay, am I good here? Do I need to add a blanket? Do I need to do something else to just maybe make some adjustments? And as you do so, allow yourself a few moments to just make those adjustments. Begin to turn inward. Being with your breath. Being with the experience of this right now. Begin to scan your body slowly. Noticing sensations as they arise. As you notice sensation, bring your attention and your breath to that area. Bring loving kindness to the area and try to soften around it, around the boundaries of it, relaxing and releasing some of the pressure. You imagine the softening of the boundaries of whatever you might be feeling, the sensations that might be present, breathing into the area. As I bring your attention to specific areas of your body, allow your breath to be there, your attention, not trying to change anything, although it may change, but simply allowing. Your head, your cheeks, bottom jawline, releasing. The muscles around your eyes, your eye sockets. All the muscles in your face and head. Your neck, throat, shoulders. So much of our emotional tension, fear, and stress is held here. Your upper back, shoulder blades. Your right arm, your left arm. The seat of your heart center. This space where we feel our emotions so intensely, like grief, disappointment, and betrayal. How are these feelings manifesting in your chest and heart space today? What do you notice? Allow them space with each exhale. Our stomach, our gut, place of judgment, of instinct, of sensing fear, sensitivity. Do you feel any anxiety here? Can you relax into it? Our pelvic floor, our hips. Bringing your attention here. Soothe and release as you can with each breath. Our right leg, thigh, knee, calf, ankle, and then our right foot. We put so much pressure on our feet and ankles as they carry us in this world. Can we bring some comfort and appreciation to them? Now our left leg, thigh, knee, calf, ankle, and finally our left foot. Bringing some extra sweetness to our feet and all that they do to support us. Where are you holding on to tension or stress, or an emotion in your body? And you take the next few moments and bring attention, your breath, and your compassion to that area of your body. With each breath, allowing it to soften, press the area with your awareness. We contemplate self-compassion and what this word means for us, what this word means today in our hearts. And you breathe the word into your body, allowing it to fill your heart space. The three components of self-compassion, kindness to self, our common humanity, that we are in this together, and having mindfulness or an observer sense of our thoughts and feelings without over-identifying with them, finding balance, finding equanimity. What sensations arise within you as you think about self-compassion? How do you show compassion to yourself as you grieve, as you move through your day? I want you to imagine yourself in a beautiful open meadow space in a warm sunny day. As you sit in the grass, imagine or visualize a wise and compassionate being in front of you. This may be a favorite teacher, friend, family member, perhaps a spiritual guru like Buddha or Jesus. Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion, perhaps even a pet or another animal. Whoever comes to mind as you think of a wise and compassionate being. Imagine them sitting across from you right now. Become aware of any pain or suffering that you are holding. Offer it to them. And imagine what this being would say or do in response. What words would they offer? How would they comfort you? Receive these gifts. If your mind wanders, bring it back to this peaceful place and this compassionate being sitting across from you, and allow yourself to receive the compassion and the wisdom of this being. With gratitude and compassion, thank this person for their time and love. And when it feels right, bringing back your attention and awareness to your own body, to your breath. And bringing your attention to your heart space, to this place where grief may also live, but where you can also find your gratitude. Speaking the words with me as I repeat, may I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free of suffering. May I be free of mental anxiety. May I live in peace. May my life be blessed with ease. Imagine a person in your life which you would like to send some extra love and compassion to. Imagine them in front of you and offer these words to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free of suffering. May you be free of mental anxiety. May you live in peace. May your life be blessed with ease. Imagining now a larger group, perhaps the whole world, yourself included. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be free of suffering. May we be free of mental anxiety. May we live in peace. May our lives be blessed with ease. Perhaps with hand to heart and belly. Just hands in lap, being with your breath, being with the gratitude and love in your heart. Starting to bring your awareness back to the space that you're in. With eyes still closed, perhaps just sensing the room around you and your body in that space. Feeling into your feet, feeling the weight of your body on the support beneath you. Perhaps making some small movements with your fingers and your toes to just bring yourself back into full awareness of you as a being in this space. And just in your own time, allowing yourself to fully arrive almost as a rebirth into this space, opening your eyes when it feels comfortable for you. I often think that at certain times in our grieving process, there is this moment where we move out of that sacred space into the linear time, that it is feeling almost like a rebirth where we open our eyes with a new sense of appreciation for the life and the world around us, or at least an opportunity to do so. So as we close up this part of our workshop, I just wanted to kind of summarize, we shared stories of grief, the Tear Soup book, which I know is always a favorite of people. And we shared some of the theories of grief and what it feels like from that perspective. We shared ideas and reflection on values, traditions, rituals that often make up this holiday season, but beyond as well. We offered ideas on the grief pact and how that might be able to aid you in these days. We asked you questions to ponder so that you can make some choices for yourself on how you want to spend your energy this holiday season and years to come that supports you, that feels good for you. We shared stories as options on how others like us have walked our own path as means of inspiration, not necessarily as comparison. We guided you through practices that can be done to help you regulate your emotions and give space to feel our emotions at this time and beyond. And some tools to help you feel like you can access these emotions and move through them instead of trying to ignore them or push them away, which, as in the story of Tear Soup, was, the pot that boiled over and made the mess often. You're going to receive the documentation of our Grief During the Holidays workbook, as well as links for an exercise on pendulation. You'll receive a yoga nidra practice, which is a beautiful practice to do even in the evenings before bed to support sleep during this period of time. There's a body scan, as well as this beautiful sound bath with Carrie Dory. I'm going to hand it over to Chantel if she wants to add anything, but with that, I'd like to just thank you for being here and for holding space with us around this. Do you want to say any final words, Chantel?
Pretty much just echoing what you just said, Glenda. Thank you for allowing us both to be here with you and for joining us in this space. I appreciate everybody who is here live with us and all the people who are watching the replay. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be taking part in this. So thank you.
So with that, we close our official circle. I'm gonna